Our last reflection this evening, we have two presenters. We have Sharon Imray from Poppies, Aberdeenshire, and Alison Hawkins from Westercoats Nursery School in Edinburgh. And I can tell you all that you are in for a real treat. Alison and Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Stella. Good evening, and thank you for inviting us to share our thoughts and experiences of how we're using Tina's book to understand Froebel's work more deeply and how it influences our practice. And I think we've heard a lot of that tonight as we've gone on. So Alison and I have been friends for many years. Our common interest, of course, is the work of Froebel, and we are both involved in the work of the Edinburgh Froebel Network. Alison has a wonderful traditional kindergarten, and over the years we've worked together on many Froebelian projects, and more recently we've been study partners on the MSc Education with Froebel Pathway at Edinburgh University. Tonight's a joint effort as Alison and I share our Froebelian experiences with you. Over to Alison.
Hello. As Sharon says, my name is Alison Hawkins. We met over a decade ago through the Edinburgh Froebel Network, and we've served as support and sounding platforms for each other ever since. Sharon, for many years you and I ran our nurseries in a free-flow manner, regarding each child as unique and competent. More time was spent outdoors than in, and regulating bodies have always commended our environments. However, recently, both our settings have evolved. Since reading Tina's new book, what particularly has resonated with you, perhaps influencing your practice?
Well, this was a difficult task to narrow down because there's just so many interesting and challenging texts that could have been chosen. But one in particular really strongly reached out to me. And we're following on from Marie on this one because it was chapter 3, where Tina advocates that we should look at engagement with nature as opposed to just enjoying nature. Over the last year, many of us have had to look at our outdoor space, especially as our guidance from lockdown was very clear that we needed to maximise the use of the outdoors. So Tina's book arrived at a very good point where we as a nursery were reflecting on how we've used the garden over the last year. Tina shares Froebel's deep love of nature, and as Froebelians ourselves, the garden, the community and nature play a key role. We examined our practice more critically and questioned ourselves, how much were we really actively engaging with nature, and was it enough? So at Poppies, without a doubt, we enjoy being in the outdoors. We've got a large outdoor area, and we've got lovely opportunities for play. We've got places to be busy. We've got places to investigate and explore, and places to be quiet and still. In the summer last year, some of our children even had their afternoon snooze in the outdoors. But does that actually mean that our children are immersed in the natural world? I think that's the same for you, Alison.
Indeed. Last August, we actually moved entirely outside, and the last 7 months or so have shown us a difference in using the outdoors as an extended environment of the playrooms versus the deeper engagement of being in nature. Space, tranquility, opportunities, and first-hand experiences such as observing the rhythm of the seasons or the changing weather patterns have all impacted positively on our children, much more so than through our previous practice. As the children play, they also maintain their gardens and spaces, and we are seeing an unhurried day-to-day life. It's interesting to note that symbolic play has increased. Communication skills are better developed, and children seem at one with nature as they plant, they grow, they tend and they eat, or they watch changing trees, using fallen twigs in their play, and being creative with natural materials. There exists a unity within the nursery community that is stronger now. Tina guides us to consider Froebel's vision, his hopes and dreams for the children to actively learn in nature. And as I have read this book, it strikes me that we hear his words, but through Tina's voice. So I suppose a question might be, how do we as practitioners not only sustain this engagement in our settings, but share it with a wider circle?
Well, we've been discussing this as a team and reflected on our own understanding of how we approach the outdoors. Tina uses a quote from Froebel that made me stop and wonder if we've unintentionally begun to be a bit complacent. Let me share it with you. Many adults, as well as children, treat nature as one ordinarily treats the air. One lives in it whilst knowing almost nothing about it. If he does not find the same awareness among adults, the seed of knowledge which is just beginning to germinate within him is crushed. It's a bit of a thought, that. We recognise that during this difficult pandemic period and the settling back to our new normal, we may have inadvertently lost sight of some of our active learning at times and may have settled into a more enjoying model. Now that really was because perhaps some days we've had lots of emotionally overwrought children returning back to Poppies, and some days it's just been difficult. Like yourself though, it has led to more child-initiated and child-led learning, but we are aware that we need to spend more time with our newer members of staff who do not yet have a full understanding and knowledge of nature. As Froebelians, it's so important that we share our knowledge and we learn from each other. Immersing ourselves in the natural world has its challenges, and as staff, we need to have the skills to deal with this. So I want to tell you a story of over the last week. Some of our children were spring cleaning the pond, and they came across our toad who'd taken his last breath. Many life and death conversations were had, and some of these questions were not easy. A funeral took place for our toad. With the sensitivity of skilled practitioners, it meant that our children could make sense of what had happened through their own first-hand experiences of life and death in our garden. In chapter 7, Tina reminds us of forms of life, beauty and knowledge, as well as we remember that everything links to everything. I think this may be a perfect example of this.
Well, that is a great example of engagement with nature, with life. Tina often reminds us of the importance Froebel placed on the quality of adult interaction and freedom with guidance. Your references to ensuring staff have the understanding of engagement, not just enjoyment, make me think of another Froebelian advocacy, that of link, link, link. And over recent years, weeks, we've both been involved in a Scottish book group discussing this very book. Not only has that encouraged us to read a chapter per week, but it has allowed robust and searching professional dialogue supporting all of our Froebelian journeys. The conversations around chapter 3 proved very interesting as folk talked about the challenge in achieving time in the outdoors. But no one, though, denied the importance of doing so. So reflecting about our move outside, we at Westcoats have concluded that we're healthier, we're happier. Together, the children and the adults explore and they discover and they learn. Being in and part of nature has enhanced our very living. It seems like the relevance of Froebelian education is very much alive and kicking.
Well, absolutely. It's wonderful to see that Froebel's philosophy is still so relevant today in early childhood practice in Scotland, and indeed what we've heard over the evening across Ireland and Wales, England. Tina shares with us Froebel's desire to embrace and make connections in and through nature, bringing what children know already and connecting it with new learning, such as the life of our Dode and its death, and the continuing conversations beyond this as children reflect themselves on what they've been learning. It's so important that we understand how to collaborate with the child and to allow the freedom to be able to initiate their own learning and transform their own environments for play. The more that children can transform the garden, the more complex their play becomes. Freedom with guidance is key. All of this, of course, is reliant on highly skilled, knowledgeable Froebelian practitioners who are inspired and motivated to be at home in nature. So what was at the heart of this particular text for us and the message that we would like you to take from this tonight?
The overwhelming message for me is, I think, that if children live in their garden areas and the wider natural environments beyond, they develop an understanding of the interrelationships of all living things, which nurtures a sense of responsibility for their world. And in turn, this engagement with nature allows them to grow as human beings. Their physical, sensory, emotional, social, and cognitive needs are met. They learn through their play, not just about things, but they acquire a highly developed self-awareness, which allows them to be confident and feel valued. COVID-enforced restrictions, plus the wisdom pronounced in this book, mean we will honour our beliefs and remain outdoors as much as possible, firmly believing that this is best for the children within our care. And what for you, Sharon?
Well, for me, I personally find that this book has served to remind me just where my roots come from. It's grounded me, it's helped me to critically re-examine the value of the play, the connection and the engagement in learning in both Poppy's Garden and our wider community. I'm committed to working alongside my team and encouraging us all to dig deeper and hold on to the joy of unearthing the buried treasure of our garden, which has been referred to many times this evening. So in my mind, I've got Froebel walking alongside me, holding my hand and giving it a wee reassuring squeeze when I need it. So for tonight, we're just going to finish off sharing a few slides with you just to finish the evening tonight from our Froebelian outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. Now over to you, Tina. I'm going to be really strict. We've got 5 minutes.
Well, I'll be very quick because I recognise we're getting very low on time. Two things. I mean, it's fascinating that this whole issue of nature has come out so strongly as one of the key things that's speaking to us about Froebelian approaches to education at the moment. And I think it probably is linked with the pandemic. But I also think that it brings in a very global feeling, because you know, these are things which are needing to be thought about by Froebelians all over the world. And I know that, you know, we're talking about the importance of gardens, keeping children in the outdoor, breathing the air, engaging with things, but many children are living in very, very cramped conditions. One of my colleagues is working with situations where children are in refugee camps. There are many children who don't have a balcony, even. They're in very small accommodation. And I think what this brings home to us is the importance of what Froebel was saying, that children need to feel part of a community, and that every community needs to have this kind of provision so that children can go into areas where they can engage with nature. Children are wonderful at doing that. I mean, you walk along a terribly urban street and, you know, you're worried because a child will start picking at the wall and you're thinking, oh my goodness, you know, what's been happening to that wall? And they'll find bits of moss and they'll pull out a flower that's growing halfway up the wall. They are absolutely amazing at finding nature. It does fascinate them. So we owe it to children that they have practitioners who are trained to help them to do this. And Froebel has always stressed the importance of adults who are working with other people's children being very well trained, mature people who really are able to get inside children's heads and tune into what's fascinating them. Observation, absolutely key. And that he was very concerned always to think about children who were growing like lilies in dark places where it's very difficult to get the best kind of environment for children to experience. But if you've got very committed practitioners, it's amazing what you can do. And parents in communities all over the world will really appreciate that kind of partnership. So perhaps if we end with community, but it's community that the child experiences as part of their everyday life, and it's helping them through their education to begin to think, how do we make a better world, and to feel they can contribute to that.
Thank you, Tina. I'm not sure what to say. I am blown over by all of the presentations. I think they've all been really powerful, and what they have shown is not just equality or issues to do with equality, but they've also really demonstrated how link always links. And you know, many people have said this book is very, very accessible. It is. There are 8 wonderful chapters which cover things like the gifts and occupations, the family songs and movement games, engagement with nature, play, and the symbolic life of the child. And Tina, I often say to Tina, in her writing, she knows how to pack a punch, but she can make some really complex subjects meaningful, but meaningful to us and our practice. Tina, Professor Tina Bruce, I just want to say a huge thank you for your time and your commitment to children and their families, and to all of the presenters